1966 after the Civil War. Their mission was to educate the black children, the recently freed slaves. See, when the slaves were freed, they weren't prepared for it, and they needed some skills. The nuns were here to help them learn to read and write. And in 1916, on Easter Sunday morning, the sisters were arrested and thrown into jail, charged with conspiracy against the government. What they were doing was in violation of one of the old Jim Crow laws that forbade whites from teaching blacks in school. Well, the judge threw the case out. He said that law did not apply to private schools. And all I can say about that is you got to be a pretty low-down Grinch to arrest a nun on Easter Sunday morning and put her in jail. That's pretty bad. Well, someone still lives here on the left. It's a private home. It's made of cypress wood. Now, we were on Bridge Street a bit earlier, and we're turning on it again. Like I say, this was the southern boundary of the walled city. We're going to go from here down to what they call the oldest house, which is really not the oldest house, because you know why? The Father Miguel O'Reilly house we just passed is older. But they call it the oldest house, and it's still pretty cool. It's going to take us along the Bay of Matanzas. Now, Matanzas is a Spanish word for slaughters or massacre, referring to Don Pedro Menendez. When he founded our city, the French had already been here for a year. They had a garrison where Jacksonville is today. It's called Fort Caroline. The French came down to attack Menendez. But Menendez got pretty lucky because a hurricane hit, and the sandbar was so rough, the French couldn't get across into the harbor. They were pinned down in the open ocean straight ahead of us. They were unable to move, and Menendez realized that it meant the fort to the north was undefended. So he took 500 men and marched on foot north. And when he got up there, he killed all the men and sent the women and children to Havana. Renamed the place Fort San Mateo for St. Matthew. While that was happening, the French and those ships broke loose and wrecked down by Cape Canaveral. And Menendez wasn't sure where they were. He took 50 men and went south of here looking for them. 12 miles from here, he took 200 French captives who he didn't like. See, he'd been fighting French pirates off the coast of Spain before coming to the New World. Menendez was a Catholic. The French were Huguenots or Protestants. He called them heretics. He simply slit the throats of all but 16 men, sparing 12 when he found out they were Catholics. The other 4 that he spared were the musicians. He then took Jean Ripley, the leader of the French party, and chopped his head off, brought him into town as a souvenir at the end of a pike, and named the bay Matanzas. Boy, sounds like just like watching CNN News today. All that throat slitting going on. You know, Menendez was only 14 years old when he ran away from home back in Spain and joined the Navy. You know, if that wind hadn't blown, the French would have defeated the Spanish almost surely. We would have had French Florida instead of Spanish Florida. Wow. Well, that changed history. This is what they call the oldest house. Now, although it's not as old as the Father Miguel O'Reilly house, the site's been occupied for over 3 centuries, and you get a guided tour here. It gives you a sense of how people lived back in the old days. This is the Gonzales Alvarez house. During the first Spanish period, there weren't any 2-story houses. Everything was on one floor and real simple. No doors into the street either, because for security, the entrance to the home was a gate into a courtyard. Today, when you see the balconies and second floors and stuff, those things were added by the British, who were here for 21 years, from 1763 to 1784, which is right through the American Revolution. 3 of the prisoners that the British kept here during the Revolution had signed the Declaration of Independence. And also another guy, does anybody know what the Gadsden flag is? Because I know you've all seen it, you probably just don't know what it's called. Christopher Gadsden was imprisoned here during the Revolution. He was a military officer. He designed one of the early colonial flags. And it's been used for different purposes. If you see pictures of the Klan, they waved it around for a while, and now the Tea Party uses it as a yellow flag with a coiled up snake says, "Don't tread on me." Well, that was originally one of the colonial flags. There was a series of them that featured snakes on them, and that's the most well-known. Well, Christopher Gadsden, who designed that flag, was imprisoned here in our city during the American Revolution. All sorts of cool trivia. It was called God's part of town down here. To the right was a Franciscan monastery. The friars were here to Christianize the natives. Well, the British, when they came, turned it into the St. Francis military barracks, and the new occupants of the oldest house put a door in front, added a second level up top. They lived upstairs, turned the bottom into a tavern across the street from the soldiers. And today, the barracks on the right is the headquarters of the Florida National Guard. This is the only military installation in our country. It's named for a religious figure, St. Francis of Assisi. Yeah, and the Pope named himself after. There's a lighthouse across the bay, 219 steps to the top. That is a first order Fresnel lens, the top in quality that was ever made. There's only a 1,000-watt bulb in there, but that lens magnifies and focuses that beam so it can be seen 20 miles out at sea. They keep it spinning during the day because the sun will shine in one spot too long. If they don't, set the thing on fire. See that green kayak across the bay? That's in front of the home of Dr. Stanley Paris. Dr. Stanley Paris left about 3 weeks ago on the 9th of this month. At 77 years old, he is attempting to become the oldest person ever to sail solo, non-stop around the world. He tried last year, got to as far as South Africa with a couple of broken ribs and a damaged boat from a storm. This is his final attempt. Pretty cool stuff. You can Google Stanley Paris, follow his blog and the GPS as he goes around the world. Is that some kind of yacht in town here? The Intercoastal Waterway. And these big yachts come up from places like Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I don't know who these people are. I could have been feeling something like that. Another thing to keep a full-time crew operating the thing and put fuel in it. It's unbelievable. If you want to do something really cool, take a harbor tour. Now it's about 10 after 3. I think the last tour is at 4:30. It'll be something I'll remember for a lifetime. Got there and see some dolphins, and it's just such a beautiful night. See the city from a whole different perspective. To find out about anything like that, stop at the marina, our next stop. Play around the miniature golf here for $1 with your train ticket. Also, the people that don't have train tickets, they have to pay $5. You know, between a round of golf and but they charge you $10 to park at the parking garage. Well, that's half the cost of your ticket right there. Pretty good deal. This is the marina. Hello, folks. How we doing today? I'm great. How can you be down on a day like this? That's something. No, you're good to go. Thank you, sir. My name is Roy, and good afternoon to you. The yellow building on the left over here was built in 1888. It was the largest department store in eastern Florida. They call it the surprise store, like the Walmart of its day. On the corner was Potter's Wax Museum, where in the 1950s, Vincent Price filmed a movie in that building. It was titled The House of Wax. When you go by the bridge up on the right, you're going to see a couple of life-size hand-carved marble lions that were carved in Italy from Carrara marble. Copies of the Medici lions in Florence. They were gifts to our city from Dr. Andrew Anderson. Dr. Anderson's father, Dr. Anderson Sr., was the guy that sold some of his land to Flagler to build his hotel and his stables and train station on. And the young Dr. Anderson gave us those lions, the Ponce de Leon statue on the left, and that flagpole up ahead of us. That's in front of the American Legion. That's a World War I memorial. Remember World War I? That was the war that was going to end all future wars. Didn't quite work out that way. In 1702, during Queen Anne's War, the English burned our city to the ground. And then in 1740, known as the War of Jenkins here, General James Oglethorpe came down from the north with a bunch of Scottish Highlanders. He had just founded the city of Savannah and set up cannons on the island. We fired on the fort for over a month, but with the fort made out of that limestone coquina rock, it didn't shatter. The cannonballs just stuck into the wall. But after a month, Nazi was down to half rations and running out of food. And one night, on a moonless night, the Spanish shut down the Intercoastal Waterway. They got resupplied about 12 miles south of here. When Oglethorpe found out about it, he wasn't too happy and wanted to storm the fort out of frustration. He gave up the attack on the 38th day. Now you see a flag floating over the fort, the Cross of Burgundy, the national flag of Spain years ago, and the flag the fort was in those colors, the white walls and red turrets. You still see some color today on the walls. About 2 2 miles north of here was Fort Mose. Fort Mose